Happy politics, and welcome to the only podcast where you're not only likely to hear tips for building a blanket fort, but possibly even actually see one. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. I did not drink tea this morning. I did drink coffee. I went for a walk yesterday in a park, but I'm tired of playing board games.
I am drinking tea right now. So, I have not cried today, but the day is young. We're recording this at, it's not even 9 a.m., so who knows? We are referring to, of course, the BC government's COVID self-care bingo card, which was released on Twitter last week. And to say that it did not go over well, I think would be slight. I can't. It would not be an exaggeration. It just, wow. Yeah. So where do you even want to start with this? There's two approaches to this, I think. And the one was that the approach that a lot of people, I think Rob Shaw and myself included, was that, this was just a big swing and a miss and didn't address some major issues, but also just, it was a little condescending. The other approach was, like that of the BC Greens, which was to, take it incredibly seriously, and they called it insulting, and they issued their own bingo card, which was, kind of grim reading. Mental health is a serious issue, but man, this is a lot more bingo talk than I think anyone would have expected in this or any other week. But it all started with one tweet.
Yes, it all started with one tweet. From the comm shop that brought you Dr. Bonnie Henry's Good Times Guide, with its glory holes, plexiglass, and mastering sex, we have the bingo card, the self-care bingo card. Now, you're right, Maclean, this is a difficult thing to talk about because it is very much well-deserving of ridicule, what they put out. But we're talking about very serious issues here. So, I'm just going to ask the listeners to, understand we take this very seriously. However, we're going to make fun of it slightly here for a moment. First, let's talk about the self-care bingo card, because not everyone's on Twitter, and God bless you if you're not, because you've actually hit one of the little self-care bingo numbers, got off social media. So congratulations on that. BC government puts out this self-care bingo card. In the middle, the free space is cried, let it out. Everything, as we mentioned, from make a blanket fort to get out in nature, clean something, laugh, journaled, eat a healthy meal, got stuff done, et cetera, et cetera. All perfectly valid suggestions, no doubt about it. The problem the BC government has is we've been in this for coming on a year, 11 months plus now. They have locked us down repeatedly through this process. They've canceled all of the events that used to give us places to let off steam and joy and entertainment. I have parents on my kids' hockey team who have not seen their children skate in a year, which is crazy. Oh, the classic testing alarm there. Who have not seen their kids skate in a year. They have not, kids have been limited to 6 hockey games during that time. We can't go frankly, boo the Canucks for the way they're playing right now. We can't go to football games. You can't even go to a pub or a bar with your best friends. Mental health is, I don't want to say fraying. I mean, it is coming right off the rails right now. We're seeing, numbers of suicides, record numbers of opioid overdoses, which it's funny that the NDP blame on the COVID restrictions, but don't actually offer any solutions to. We have divorces at a higher rate than normal. Things are struggling. Even families that have weathered the storm pretty well until now. I mean, I've got 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old in the house. They're done. They are emotionally and mentally done with this thing. They're starting to get a little chippy with each other, as kids do. And first thought this was my only us, but talked to some other families who also have teenagers in the house, and they're all like this, right? It's just the loss, the constant restrictions, the constant having to be on edge, not just for doing the right thing, but making sure you're being seen to do the right thing. It's worn on us as a society. So when you come out with a self-care bingo card, and one of your options is make a blanket fort, 11 months in, you're going to get ridiculed. It's going to feel tone deaf. It's going to feel like you're minimizing the effects of what's going on. And you got to be smarter than this. The Good Times Guide didn't go over well, and that was in the summer when we actually could have, compared to today, half decent good times, because at least we could have, a beer in the backyard with some folks, 8 or 9 feet away. It was so tone deaf. Like, I don't understand what the comp shop was thinking, why they decided to roll it out now. Like, and who was the dummy who came up with this idea?
Well, I mean, I don't know who, but I can tell you exactly how and why this happened, because I've worked with, government communication shops before. This bingo card was not constructed by a mental health professional. This bingo card was constructed by a government communications person and a graphic designer, and they would probably been told by a middle manager that the government needs to do more, and we need to do stuff to win on social media, and we need to have fun and come up with something, create content. And so this poor comms person did their best and came up with a bingo card and filled it in with, what they probably thought was fairly anodyne advice, like cry and build a blanket fort. But the problem is, as you just said, these are serious issues. And at the very least, people could be forgiven for feeling condescended to and, being told that, well, if you're struggling with mental health, it's kind of on you, because have you tried building a blanket fort? And so, I mean, that's why this bombed. This wasn't a well-meaning effort from a mental health professional. This was a communications person who almost certainly had been told to just put something out there because, we're being told to create more content. And this is what happens.
Yeah. Now, the amazing thing is, right away, I mean, the reaction was intensely opposed to this. From many of the NDPs, what you would consider their traditional political allies. They were among the most critical. There was much funnier versions sent out, like created and sent out by, random people on Twitter, where, suggestions, some of them got dark, right? Like, this is COVID. It's killed 1,500 British Columbians. This is a dark time. And, some people were putting out, bingo cards like, missed the funeral for my grandma, like things like this on it, like hard things. Some people took a lighter touch and sort of, made fun of the bingo card in the bingo card, which is really meta. But like, it didn't land, it didn't resonate. The Greens came in 2 or 3 days later. Last night, they put out their own bingo card. And God bless them, like, no one's going to accuse the Greens of ever having a sense of humor. So, it was very serious, policy prescriptions in each square. But look, in that, 25 space bingo card that the Greens put out, they had 25 better ideas than this, nonsense that we saw from the BC government. So,
and you can't blame them for taking an outraged approach, because in 2021 on social media, that's trying to have fun with things is dangerous.
Oh, for
and
sure.
so it's just being angry is kind of the safest play.
Yeah. So what I liked about Rob Shaw's piece on this in the Orca was that he tied it to the words you hear from Horgan and folks in the NDP about mental health and the actions that actually follow up. And look, it doesn't matter what government's in power. Like, we would all say, yeah, I mean, they obviously are interested in helping British Columbians' mental health in pandemic or out of pandemic. Like, no one's in office going like, I want people to suffer from mental illness, and that's not it. They want to offer supports and helps as best they can. The problem is the NDP, shredded the Christy Clark government, mainly over the opioid addiction, linking it to the mental health issues. In opposition, Horgan shredded her constantly, and then has come into power. He said that I'm going to have a minister of mental health that's going to wake up every single day thinking about these issues and go to bed every single night thinking about solutions to these issues, and then funded it for $10 million less than the Premier's office got. And moved the needle not 1 inch. In fact, we're at record levels of opioid overdoses. So if that's the measuring stick you're using, the Premier has clearly failed. Pandemic or no pandemic, you failed. If that is the measuring stick that you held your predecessor to, you should be held to the same one no matter what. They got to do more. And I think that was, Rob's piece was like, well, they'll roll out 10 beds here or 12 beds there, and that sounds great, but no one has any sense of, like, is that 1% of the need, 10% of the need filled, 100% of the need filled? Like, there's no context to it. There's no real true funding for it. I'm not even sure who the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions is today. Like,
I should know that, and I'm drawing a blank.
It was Judy Darcy, but that tells you the kind of profile that person has right now.
Yeah.
And they might be doing great, quiet work behind the scenes, and God bless you if you are, because we need it. But we don't know anything about it. They got to do more. Like if this was going to be the great measuring stick for you as a progressive premier, you've failed so far. And bingo cards like this show how little you're like. Someone elected signed off on this bingo card somewhere, whether it was Adrian Dix or the Minister of Mental Health or the Premier's office or whoever oversees GCPE these days. Someone signed off on this somewhere. You would think. Not good enough. You got to do better than this.
Yeah, I mean, the best you can say was it was something that didn't land, and I think that's probably the most charitable possible interpretation. But wow, that is as much bingo as we've ever talked about on this show, and God willing, it's never again.
Side note: I'm an excellent bingo caller. Whenever we did have family gatherings and we would play a little bit of bingo, my grandmother loved bingo, so we would play it from time to time. She was a conservative Christian who, for some reason, bingo was okay in the games of chance, but other games were not. Maybe because it didn't involve evil playing cards. But I'm an excellent bingo caller. So if you're ever doing an event post-COVID and you need a bingo caller, I'm happy to come and help with that.
There you go, something to look forward to.
Yes, exactly.
So, speaking of things to look forward to, since we last spoke, the BC Liberal leadership race has taken a little more form. We have a timeline now that Andrew Wilkinson has formally resigned as leader. There is it triggered basically a countdown clock in the Constitution saying they had a year. He was sort of holding out, having resigned in a de facto way, but not in a official way, because there's a pandemic going on and they didn't want to have to rush the leadership race. And so we also have one official sort of entrant in Ellis Ross, who I think accidentally announced in a big scoop for the Terrace Standard. And we have one semi-official put it out there floating candidacy in Mike Morris, the Prince George MLA and longtime RCMP veteran. I mean, the Ellis Ross announcement, if you know Ellis Ross at all, is kind of the most Ellis Ross thing you can imagine.
It's perfect.
And then a follow-up interview with Richard Zussman saying, yeah, I guess I'm doing this. It's out there now. I mean, whereas Mike Morris had an interview with I believe his local paper saying he's thinking about it, which is a very sort of testing the waters thing to do. What are your thoughts on Ellis Ross first?
Well, first on Ellis Ross. Ellis will be a formidable candidate despite the less than perfectly packaged start to this race. Now, some politicians, Kevin Falcon, very likely we're going to run, I think he's 99% in. Kevin Falcon will have a perfectly packaged campaign launch. There'll be, if you're allowed to have an event, it'll be at an event. There'll be supporters there with signs and waving. There'll be a good cross section of ethnicities and backgrounds and classes, and it'll be perfectly managed. There'll be press releases to roll out and backgrounders and all sorts of things. There'll be immediate availabilities, all that. It'll be flawlessly executed because that team, knowing the folks who are on that team around, this is what they do, they'll execute it. Ellis Ross is not that. He is the uncandidate. And I actually think he should lean into this more and more, right? Like, I'm not slick and packaged and, perfectly acceptable to downtown Vancouver or whatever, right? Like, I'm not trying to win marketing awards. I'm trying to, rebuild a party by telling an important story. Ellis's strength is that he has a compelling story and a proven track record in how economic prosperity can turn the fortunes of a community around. What he and the Haisla First Nations team did around LNG Canada changed that community for the better. And they had tried for decades different things to try to bring prosperity in that community, try to give their kids hope and futures and jobs and all of that stuff. And he'd be the first to tell you it didn't really work. Maybe for 2 years it would work, and then the kids would have to move off out of their community to get jobs. It was not working. Mm-hmm. They saw LNG Canada as an opportunity, and they seized it. And they created deals with the pipeline builders and the natural gas folks and other corollary businesses. They've created businesses to help serve it, and they are prospering. So you can actually now go to downtown Vancouver or places where the recession from COVID has hit and say, listen, I know how to, turn this around. I've done it in my community in the Haisla First Nation. Terrace is booming. Prince Rupert is, stronger than ever. We can bring that same kind of can-do attitude down to, the Lower Mainland and help, that old story like a rising tide floats all boats. That is a compelling narrative.
It is. And I mean, we talked about this on the Political Capital show on Friday, and Rob Shaw pointed out something that I think is worth mentioning because he's not the only one who observed it, but he pointed it out on Friday. And that is Ellis Ross is a unique politician in the legislature in that when he stands up and speaks, he commands the room. There is absolute silence. And part of it is just, he's a First Nations, he's an Indigenous leader, and, heckling just isn't done. But as you kind of point out, his story is compelling and unique. And so, people just sort of stop and listen. It's really, I haven't seen anything quite like it. I have worked around really, commanding, powerful public speakers in my career on both sides. And Ellis Ross is not what you'd call, I was going to say he's not a charismatic speaker. That sounds like a criticism. I just mean like he's not, full of vim and energy when he speaks. Yeah. But, man, you can hear a pin drop when he gets up to speak. And there really isn't anyone like that.
Yeah, there's I don't want to say grudging respect, because I actually don't think the NDPers respect him that much. But, you know what I mean? There's a sense that when he speaks, it's important. He was the point person for the BC Liberals on the truth and or the UNDRIP issues. Obviously, and who better to speak on these issues than someone who, is living it, serving both sides, understands these issues in a way that, and has given thought to these issues in a way that most of us just haven't. Like that,
of course,
that is there's a depth there. He presents an interesting problem for other candidates in the Liberal race. Most of the voters, 99.9% of the voters, will have never been to Terrace. Wouldn't be able to tell you where the Haisla are on a map. But so he can actually tell this story, and it's going to seem new, fresh to the BC Liberal members, and then the general public and media at large. And there's no really way to fact check it. You know what I mean? I don't. Not that he's not going to tell the truth, but you're not going to be like, no, I think it's a dump, right? You're not going to say that because you've never been, right? So he has this kind of open playing field, and certainly his opponents aren't going to try to poke holes in it, because it is a major success story and a piece of the BC Liberal legacy, as much as the Port Mann Bridge is, or Canada Line is, or the 2010 Olympics are, so is, LNG. That is, despite the fact that it was, Horgan who got it into the end zone from the 1 yard line, it was Christy Clark who drove the ball 99 yards to get there. I guess you can't drive the ball 99 yards because you'd be starting in your own end zone, but you know what I mean.
Do
98 yards.
I mean, this is something that others are talking about in that, again, not to throw back to Political Capital, but the question was asked, is Ellis Ross the urban leader that the BC Liberals need? And obviously not. He's from outside of Terrace, and he's Haisla. But, I mean, he would present so many interesting difficulties for the NDP in terms of things like leaders' debates. Whereas, obviously the NDP are pointing to passing UNDRIP as perhaps their signature accomplishment of this government. Being put in a position where you're facing an opposition leader or a challenger to become premier who is in fact First Nations, and a First Nations leader telling you, well, this is what reconciliation looks like. It's not just words on a paper. It's actually having us help form government. I mean, what do you say to that? And the other criticism that Ellis might face from the environmental crowd is his wholehearted and full-throated support for LNG. That is not a criticism he's going to hear from the NDP right now. Nope. Because they, as you just say, I mean, they pushed all their cards into the center of the table on LNG, I think, to their credit. And Ellis was there with them at the LNG Canada announcement. And so it would be very odd for them to suddenly say, well, no, I mean, it worked for you, but it won't work for it, it only works for you. And in this specific case, that's a silly argument. And so I'm not suggesting he will win, but he would be a fascinating candidate.
Yeah, there's only, and it's only going to get better for the Haisla and Terrace, in the short term. LNG Canada is going to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars there. Crystal Smith, I believe, is still the chief counselor now of the Haisla First Nation. She's excellent, an excellent representative, carrying on the tradition of Ellis and others. So the opportunity is there. You could plot a path, and I don't I don't necessarily think you have to be urban to understand urban issues or to speak effectively to them. I think it's more about the message of, we need prosperity, invest in our economy, not just through natural resources, but every means possible. Let's get tourism up off the mat. I wandered through downtown Vancouver over the weekend. We took the kids down because the blanket fort had, fallen apart, and so we needed to go for a walk. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned with the economic and the cultural and the financial state of that area. And we talk a lot about, responsible resource development, the engine of the economy, small business is the engine of the economy. In a lot of ways, downtown Vancouver is the driver on economic issues, culinary issues, cultural issues, art issues. Like, it really does set a lot of the tone for BC. It's clear that the loss of tourism has hurt. There are so many for lease signs. There are so many stores out of business. There's so much retail that has disappeared. Restaurants are closed or have very minimal hours. We went down on a weekend and there were blocks where we didn't see other people, which is very rare for downtown Vancouver where, hundreds of thousands of people live. So it's concerning. And, Ellis Ross coming and saying, hey, I can help solve this problem. Like, we need to go all in on economic development of every possible sort, tech, film, tourism, resources. We got to do it all because we got to grow the economic pie. I do think that is a powerful narrative.
It'll be he is the first official entrant, even if his first step might have been an accident. And hey, media scoops, they happen. Yeah. The other entrant we wanted to discuss quickly is Mike Morris, who is not an official entrant yet, as we said earlier. He is floating it, which is a wise strategy. You never know. Put out a trial balloon. Mike Morris is, I believe, the Prince George Mackenzie. I always confuse those two ridings.
Shirley is Vailmont.
Thank you. And Mike Morris is a 30-plus year veteran of the RCMP and commanded detachments and all that. He's a quiet, soft-spoken man, as many police officers are, if you know them in person, and even has a perfect police officer mustache. This is not a name that I had heard before reading that article. He was not among the names bandied about. I don't think we've ever mentioned him in that context, but he be an interesting addition as well.
Yeah, he would be. You're right. There's something calming about Mike Morris. Every time I see him, and it might be, a career as an RCMP officer, you learn how to de-escalate if you're going to be successful. And, Jordan comes in with nervous energy or whatever, and, Mike Morris de-escalates the situation and calms down the stakeholders. Like, he's very much a calming influence in that caucus. I believe everyone I've talked to likes him. Like, there's no, Mike Morris, he's out for himself or anything like that. There's none of that. He seems like very much a team player. I was surprised to see him floating the idea in the PG. I don't think it was the Citizen. I think it was whatever the CKPG maybe.
Yeah, I believe so.
But, at the same time, look, like if I were an MLA, I'd never rule myself out either. It's good to be talked about. However, for Mike Morris, he does not have the same, marketing evil political brain that you and I do, Maclean. He is just a naturally nice human being. So for him, I actually do take him at his word. I think he is actually kicking the tires on this idea, and he would bring, look, the BC Liberal Caucus right now is very rural, very northern. So it makes sense that we're going to have multiple folks from the north in the race. And, we talked about urban issues with Ellis Ross. Well, let's talk about the number one issue identified by most, other than COVID, by most urban dwellers. It would be Strathcona Park. It would be crime on the streets. It would be what you saw in Beacon Hill Park in Victoria. Like, there is a discomfort for a lot of people with how police are being managed, how police are being fettered in their ability to deal with issues, how homeless camps pop up, and not just pop up, but often take dark turns. Because Strathcona Park, it's been there for months and months and months. And I think David Eby said, we're going to get everyone now into housing by end of April or something. Like, it's been like a year of this for these poor people. In the camp itself and around the camp, part of what we did is I drove through the downtown east side when we went to Vancouver, and the park, I forget the name, this is terrible. There's a park on Hastings where that was an original encampment. It's still fenced off and closed to the public. There's no tents there, but clearly they're not allowing folks in. So you're losing all this. It would be interesting to know what Mike Morris's kind of solutions, ideas. I don't perceive him as, despite being a police officer, as heavy-handed in any way.
No, I don't think so either.
I don't sense that's his brand. So yeah, let's talk about these issues. That's part of the outreach that needs to happen to urban and suburban voters.
Yeah, you mentioned, there'll be some who don't know, who are just observers of BC politics and don't see it on a first-hand basis, who will, oh, he's a cop. He's going to be heavy-handed, as you say. It's just not true. I watched closely the debate and questioning over the legalization of cannabis and marijuana. And Morris was the official opposition critic on that. And I can tell you firsthand, the NDP had a lot of respect for how he handled that. He asked very good, insightful, pointed questions because he has unique expertise on the file, but he always framed it in this, as you say, very calm, de-escalating way. It was it would almost wrong foot you. He was trying to good cop them, and and they will tell you privately that he would raise good issues, and then behind the scenes they'd say, actually, we should change this one thing. So he's effective in a sort of quiet, understated way.
Yeah, I agree. You wonder as well, you talk about a party that clearly is dealing with the media tarnish around money laundering. A police officer might be a good counter to that. Who knows? So yeah, we'll see. Why not? For me, this leadership race early on, I'm like, the more the merrier. Put everyone in the leadership race. Let's see everyone, and then like Macho Man Randy Savage once said, the cream will rise to the top.
It does that. It does that. And there's been some hand-wringing about, the timelines. And that, well, okay, now that Wilkinson's resigned, how come Kevin Falcon hasn't officially announced? How come we're not seeing all these other names that you and I have talked about and maybe others? And the simple truth is we still don't have the rules and the format. And why? Why would you launch now? Ellis Ross didn't mean to. I think he just sort of mentioned it to a reporter he likes, and that's why that came out. But, that's the closest we've had. But until they know how and when and the format and the rules, it's just it'd be kind of silly unless you think you have such a clear. Either you're so far behind that you may as well get the splash when you can, or you're so far ahead that you may as well just get it out there. And I don't think anyone fits either of those categories. So I think it's going to be a little while until we get the rules down. It'll still be a bit of a holding pattern.
Yeah, look, no one can travel. If you're a BC Liberal MLA and you're kicking the tires on this, like if you're Mike Morris, great, schedule Zoom calls with every riding association you can find, right? You don't need to be a candidate to do that and say, hey, I want to talk about crime issues in your. I apologize. I should look up the critic roles. I don't know what Mike's the critic for, but whatever that is, let's talk about these issues. And you can do all of that groundwork and kind of get to know people without being a formal candidate. But you're right. There's no point, hold your powder. There's no point getting into the race now. Furthermore, Keith Baldry has a piece out this week that, the BC Liberal leadership race is being totally overshadowed by COVID and won't get any media coverage from COVID. Hey, Keith, you can give it media coverage. You have the biggest bullhorn in the media on the Global News Hour every single night for a couple of minutes. If you want to talk about it. We don't need to always hear the latest stats from you or the analysis of the latest stats from you on COVID. Anyways, sorry, side note. I love Keith, but I'm a little over the COVID update every single night from Keith. I want to hear politics. Give me some politics, Keith. Anyways, all that to say, you have to. There's no, Kevin Falcon. Okay, he declares tomorrow. Then what does he do on Wednesday? Or I guess tomorrow is Wednesday. What does he do on Thursday? He can't travel. There's no rules. He can't get access to the membership list yet. He might as well wait.
Yeah, exactly. There's this. You mentioned Keith's column, and there's been a few others like that, and saying, "Well, how come there hasn't been any? They're having trouble attracting attention." Well, it hasn't started. Yeah.
It's like saying, boy, that new show on the CW, Superman and Lois, man, they haven't attracted any ratings yet. Yeah, because they haven't aired yet. Come on.
Yeah, I think that once there are official candidates and they start, approaching the media and all that, then yes, things will start to it'll garner more attention. Political reporters won't be able to help themselves, nor should they. That's their job. But I mean, I think of course there will be an appetite for sort of normal politics, in the late stages of the pandemic, and talking about something as in some ways familiar and intriguing as a leadership race. I think there's going to be an eager and receptive audience, even to people who are, resolutely hostile to the party. They're going to be watching with interest.
All right, I'm going to add normal politics to the next bingo card for the BC government there. You're right. Like, hold your powder, everyone. Just relax. Who knows what the fall will bring. I don't see this leadership race really kicking off until post-Christmas or post-summer. Summer hopefully will be spent, I was going to say on the barbecue circuit, but I guess there won't be one again. I don't know. But
not this year, unfortunately.
On the Zoom barbecue circuit. But
that's nothing sadder than a Zoom barbecue.
Yeah. Well, let me hold on one more. Before we move off of that, one more point on this leadership race. This will have to be a more grassroots effort than ever before.
Yeah.
Because you can't draw the big crowds. You can't go door to door and sell a bunch of you're going to have to be. It's going to be about winning over one person in a riding, who then goes over and wins over 5 more, who wins. It's going to be about. It's not going to be about Kevin Falcon going to Cranbrook for a big speech. It's going to be about Kevin Falcon calling every member, BC Liberal member in Cranbrook. So the grassroots nature of this will be fascinating. I actually think that's a good thing. It may, end up speeding the kind of refresh and rebuild of the party, simply because you're really going to be forced to engage the grassroots one at a time in a way that you haven't had to in previous leadership races here.
Yeah, that's true. There will be no rallies until right at the end, and even hopefully then, because God only knows what the state of the pandemic will be by then. The other thing I wanted to touch on today is a piece we published on Saturday from Mark Milkey. And Mark brings up a point that's been brought up many times in the past, and that is the name of the BC Liberal Party. And Mark suggests that it is a problem and it is time to change the name. I suspect this is an issue where you and I will disagree, and that's fine. We're allowed. Mark proposes
if you want to be wrong,
BC...
Maclean. If you want to be wrong, Maclean.
Right?
If you ever want to be wrong, Maclean, I'm willing to allow you to be wrong. So.
We have to spice things up once in a while. Mark proposes the name the BC Opportunity Party, which I just don't think is a sexy name, and I don't think would catch on.
Why don't you love B-Cop?
B-Cop. I hadn't even thought of that.
If I'm Mike Morris, I'm renaming this the BC Opportunity Party because B-Cop. B-Cop. Yeah.
Here's the thing. The people who object to the name BC Liberal are people who the problem for them is the word liberal. Mm-hmm. And we are pretty much exclusively talking about federal conservatives when we say this. And to me, the response I would have to that is that the problem the party has right now is not that it's losing federal conservative voters, it's losing federal liberal voters. And this would actually be the wrong time to change the name if that ever was going to happen. And the other part of my objection is if you are going to change the name of a party that has been successful, you really need to have a much better name locked down. You don't want to get into a Bodie McBoatface situation where you've committed to a name change and then leave it up to the whims of the people. I think that's a terrible idea. But reasonable people can disagree, and I suspect one is about to.
Yes, Maclean, never has a person been so wrong on a podcast as you are right now. Wrong. The mayor of Wrongville, wrong. No, I'm just kidding. No, I hear what you're saying, and I know it's because you are a dirtbag federal liberal. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously,
well, there's a party name for you, the Dirtbag Party.
The Dirtbag Party. There's been worse. There's been worse names. Okay, well, let's take a step back. The free enterprise vehicle in British Columbia over the years has changed names a few times. It used to be the Conservative Party back in the day, then became the Social Credit Party under W.A.C. Bennett. It almost changed in the 70s, but Bill Bennett kept the name. Then, Gordon Wilson broke through with the BC Liberals. The Socreds died away, and off we went into the BC Liberal era. But it's always been kind of like the same philosophy throughout history.
A continuum.
The problem you have with the Liberal brand is twofold. Number one, there's no middle ground on Justin Trudeau. You either love Trudeau or you loathe Trudeau. And my friend Hamish Marshall, who ran the ill-fated Andrew Scheer campaign, said, most politicians, there's a dimmer switch. And, as the person running against them, you're always trying to dim the light a little bit on them. Not for Trudeau. There is no dimmer switch for Trudeau. It's on until it's off. And there's no going back, once it's off. So the Liberal brand is now more synonymous with Justin Trudeau in British Columbia than it ever was with Gordon Campbell or Christy Clark. So you have this current of bad feeling among the Conservatives who, let's remember, already are starting to feel under attack a little bit by the party, especially social Conservatives. I mean, they saw what happened to Laurie Thrones. They've lived through Christy Clark's clone speech, which threw out every principle they just run an election and won the popular vote on. Not every principle, most of the principles. They've put up with an Andrew Wilkinson platform that, frankly, could have been an NDP platform. Was there much difference? ICBC privatization or competition aside, not a lot of as much difference as there have been in previous years. So you have these Conservatives already questioning, do we even belong in this party anymore? Fiscal Conservatives going okay, they don't want to criticize debt and deficit spending during COVID. We get that, but at some point we got to start talking about these issues. Where's that discussion? So you have all that kind of undercurrent happening. To continue to force them to, vote BC Liberal, it's like a poke in the eye. Look, we do a lot on the ICBA Facebook page. I don't read. I don't read everything on the Orca Facebook page, but I'm on there, poking around from time to time. You look on CBC and other BC political web pages. There is a visceral, undeniable disgust with the name Liberal, and it's often comes up. I'll never vote for Trudeau, and you're like, no, it's the BC Liberal Party. It's different than But when you're explaining, you're losing.
Yeah.
So why bother even explaining? Okay, it's a Made in BC party, it's a Made in BC coalition, and we're going to rename it the British Columbia is Awesome Party. Whatever it is. I'm not sure Bob Kronbauer let us have it.
I was going to say, Premier Kronbauer approves.
Premier Kronbauer, we could do worse. That would be his slogan.
We could do worse.
We could do worse. Premier Kronbauer. I've been everywhere, man. So... Actually, now I'm on board a Kronbauer candidacy.
Yeah, that's Bob. It's not too late. It's not even close to too late. It's still early.
Where he didn't ski down that Prince George Hill. I think that would be bad. Kronbauer chickened out of that. I'm just kidding. I wouldn't do it either. Anyways, I forget what we were talking about. Oh yes. So find a new name. You'll find the right one. It's not rocket science. Maybe it's the Pacific Party. Maybe it's the BC Pacific Party. Maybe although. The Kootenays would feel a long way from the Pacific. But
right.
You'll find it. You'll find it. It's not worth keeping the Liberal name. You're going to have to trigger... The number one thing that the new leader in the reconstituted BC Liberal Party needs to do is have a big banner that says, under new management, put that on everything. And say, look, we're breaking from the past. We've gone through this leadership process. Now we're going through a values exercise as part of that with our membership. We, what we believe in, what we stand for, how we recontextualize our values and our principles for this new era in BC politics, post-COVID in BC economics. There's an old saying, you got to be anchored to the rock, but geared to the times. We're anchored to the rocks of our value. These are our values that we don't negotiate on. We believe this. But here's how we spell it out in this day and age. For example, we believe in economic prosperity, but what are the outcomes of that, and this will come as a surprise for many who consider me an anti-government fiscal conservative, even libertarian, is childcare is a way to get more economic prosperity because childcare frees up a huge portion of the young workforce to get into jobs and generate prosperity. So that is something that we gear to the times, but is anchored to that rock, that value. So. All that to say, the Liberal name, why bother? It's a impingement. It's a burr in the saddle for so many people. The people who really, really care about the Liberal name generally hate it. They don't care about it because they love it. So find a new name, reconstitute it. You're going to have to expand that coalition anyways. But you've got to show a break from a break from the negativity of the past, and a name change is part of that.
I guess it's somewhat ironic that my hesitation to embrace change for change's sake would make me adopting the small c conservative position on this issue.
What happened to you, man?
Hey, look, we disagreed and we did it without throwing things at each other. This is a good thing. And here's the thing: I think that the way, if you had to do it, if you had made up your mind that the name change must happen for whatever reason, we don't need to get into that. You'd have to have the name locked down. I don't want like an Edmonton EE football team situation where you're floating like, well, we're going to be the Evergold Party.
Yeah.
No. It's the parallel. If you're someone like yourself who thinks that changing the name is a good idea, I think the parallel should be Saskatchewan, where you had it's hard to draw exact parallels, but broadly speaking, there was a long established party whose name became somewhat tainted for very different reasons, and they decided to change it, and they chose I think a brilliant name, which is the Saskatchewan Party. Now, I'm told that the BC Party is taken. I'm not sure by who, but I mean that would be the way to go if they chose to do it. I don't think, with all due respect to Mark Milkey, who is a much more intelligent man than I don't think something like the BC Opportunity Party is the answer. But if you did it, it would have to be something broad and generic and unfailingly nonpartisan sounding, like the BC Party, which, as I say, unfortunately is not available.
Yeah. There's something evocative. Like, one of the great names in British Columbia is Sea to Sky. Like, what a great brand. Sea to Sky. Now, we take that to mean, Squamish, essentially, or North Van to Whistler. But that's not incorrect, right? From the sea to the sky of the Rocky Mountains. Like, there's something kind of cool there. Maybe it's, BC Energy. I'm just throwing that out there. Probably not energy because you kind of go around and around. But you know what I mean. Like, there are options. They can find one. By the way, you bring up the Sask Party. If Brad Wall wants to come and run for leader of the BC whatever party, I, for one, am on board and will be happy to sign the nomination paper. Save us, Brad Wall. Just to close the Liberal
don't
discussion.
Look at them comparing housing prices between Regina and anywhere in BC. Just save that for later.
Yeah, don't do that. Just to close off that Liberal discussion, the Trudeau Liberals are a long way from the Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien Liberals that were in vogue when Gordon Campbell took over that thing. And I know you are a Paul Martin Liberal, a fiscally conservative, socially liberal. Which,
I worked for Chrétien, but yes, that is. Yeah. I would not disagree with that description.
Yeah, and sorry, I always give Martin credit for the fiscal conservative side more than Chrétien,
which is fair.
They both delivered. Together they created the single most important budget in Canadian history, at great political cost to them, but they overcame it. So the Chrétien Martin type liberals, like I said, the fiscally conservative, but not like crazy fiscal conservative and socially liberal. They're looking for a home. And, my sense is maybe they went NDP-ish in the last one because they didn't feel comfortable with where the BC Liberals were at. But I do think they're still up for grabs. I don't think the Liberal name itself means as much to them anymore. I think of Dan McTeague, for example, the Gas Buddy guy, who's a great Twitter follow, by the way. And there's a former Chrétien Martin MP who now loathes the Trudeau Liberal Party. And it's because they've strayed so far from the fiscally conservative values, the economic prosperity values. He still believes generally what they believe socially. Like, he's not a radical social conservative at all, but he's strayed from it. Where do the Dan McTeagues in British Columbia go? And that will be the battleground for that next election. And I think a name change helps you at least get a second look at your party.
I think of all the people I follow on Twitter, the most rabid and uncompromising critic of Justin Trudeau is Warren Kinsella, who is I guess originally a BC guy, who also worked for Jean Chrétien, although I believe I've never met him to my knowledge. But the point is, yes, he's I guess it would be accurate to call him a former Liberal. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would remember meeting Warren Kinsella because he would tell you that the Darth Vader music would have come on and the lights would have gone down, or maybe like the Undertaker, the death bell would have, would have rung, bong. Oh, who's that? Oh my God! By God, it's Warren Kinsella! Bong. You would have known.
I probably would have.
I love Warren Kinsella. I mean, I've never met him either. I just love his tweets and.
But I mean, he illustrates your point. I mean, in that it's not a life thing, and he has become a strident critic of the current federal government. As I say, I think arguably the most strident of anyone that I follow on Twitter.
Yeah, there's
not counting, like Michelle Rempel Garner or people like that, dude. I'm talking about, people who are not in opposition physically.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I've said enough on this issue, but.
Yeah, and you know what? This is an issue that has been it hasn't gone away. When we were talking about this 10 years ago, and we'll probably be talking about this 10 years from now. Who knows? So, a lot of BC issues are like that, like the Massey Tunnel and other things that we haven't talked about this week. That's next week, maybe. Who knows? Any other last thoughts before we get into next week, which will be a session? BC Poly Hot Stove. The House is coming back.
That is correct. The first is a throne speech, and no one seems to know anything that's going to be in it, which tells you that perhaps the government is just a little bit more adrift than we thought they would be in their first throne speech since an election, given the fact they needed this mandate in order to show, that they had support. Like, there's no real discussion as to what's going to be in it. So I'm sure the reporters are busy.
That will be, as a quick aside on the throne speech, the response to the throne speech will be most interesting from the Greens. And no disrespect to the Liberal response, but in the context of what happened in the last election, with the NDP will present their throne speech, as you say, the first one since the snap election and the dissolution of CASA. And it'll be interesting for the Greens to stand up and say, this is what you did all that for? I mean, we would have happily supported you on all these things. And we had been since last year, which only sort of underlines that, the reason you called this election is for a majority government and less of a check on your power. And, congratulations to you, it worked. But guess what? The jig's up. Like, there's nothing in here that we wouldn't have worked with you on. Yeah.
So you think the Greens will vote for it?
It's a good question, actually. It'd be fascinating to see. There's only two of them, and they don't whip, so who knows? But they could vote against it, and they probably will. And it's easy to point to one thing if you're an opposition party. If LNG is mentioned in any way, shape, or form, then they'll vote against it and feel good about it. And or Site C. Site C is another thing where they have been probably even better example lately, where they can point to something that they are objecting to, and so it'll be easy for them to vote against it. But in the speech and all that, and in the media, because they're getting very good at things like online town halls, it'll be a easy talking point. You can't trust these guys. You can't trust them. Yeah. They said that they couldn't rely on us to support these things. Do you see anything in here that we wouldn't have worked with them on? No. Yeah.
No, I agree completely. Okay, Maclean, last question for you.
Yes.
I know you're on this Capital Direct, political capital show with Robin. The hot stove's still your favorite, right?
Of course.
All right.
Of course. It means nothing to me. Nothing to me at all. No, just kidding. It's a fun show, and this is home. This is home.
Good.
It's literally filmed in my home, so it's literally home.
Excellent. Well, that makes me feel much better.
until next. That's why we're here. We're here for happy politics. We're here to put a smile on everyone's face.
Put that on your bingo card. Maclean and Jordan, love it.
And the last thing I'm going to note on, I mentioned to my wife I was going to be taping the show today, and she was unaware of the bingo card thing. This is true. She's not on social media. Was completely unaware of the story. And last night, after she had put Ian down to bed, she was cleaning up. This is true. She was cleaning up the couches and that behind me. Said, and I quote, "We have to make sure to get the blanket fort out of the frame for you." And I laughed for like 5 minutes and then had to explain why.
Blanket fort. Bingo. There you go, folks. Right. We did it.
All right. Until next week, he's Jordan Bateman. I'm Maclean K. Happy politics.